It's time for the unofficial 40. Soonerscoop.com's very official recruiting podcast featuring Soonerscoop.com recruiting publisher Josh McCuistion. Get your recruiting fix from the leader in Sooner recruiting. It's the unofficial 40 with your hosts, Soonerscoop.com publishers Gary Murdoch and Josh McCuistion.
All right, welcome everybody. It is time for the podcast of doom, as I think we should probably be calling it. Gary Murdoch here, Josh McCuistion joins us from his studio. Eddie Radosevich and Joe Duvall are here. Boys, I guess it's time for us to do another podcast, considering since we've been blamed for all the ills in the world since we didn't do one last week.
Yeah, I think we should just clear the stage for Josh right here, right? Like play the Imperial March music, and let's see what he has to say. And you know, kind of like the end of a disaster movie, like Morgan Freeman, a president, standing in front of a toppled Washington monument, speaking to the people.
There it is. Josh can't hear it, but music of doom. All right, shut up. Josh McCuistion joins us, and Josh, help the people. Help the people who need the helping. Tell them it's all going to be better. By the way, Josh, I called Josh today, and it was the typical, "You doing okay, pal?" And Josh probably knew that phone call was coming after this weekend, because Cameron Rising switches commitments while Josh is at a wedding just trying to be a normal human being. And I was just glad that you didn't leave the wedding. Like, some shithead is going to do that on a Saturday night, doesn't care about the rest of the world. Don't let it ruin your night. So I applaud you, sir, for not leaving the wedding.
You know, and it momentarily crossed my mind. But I want to say, as much grief as we sometimes, or I guess I sometimes, and you all laugh about, give grief to Tiffany. Literally, Tiffany was like, "Do we need to go?" Like that was the first thing she said to me. And this was like one of her good work friends and this whole thing. So, I mean, it would have been, definitely her problem if we'd have left. And the good reporter's wife that she is, she got it. But it was, the die was cast, man. And it's one of those things that I always get into with people. Like, what am I going to tell you? Am I going to tell you something that says, this is all better? Man, no, this is a bad beat for OU. This is not the way you wanted it to go. Now they're having to play catch-up in 2018 quarterback recruiting because, I talked to a few people that night that were like, we're going to have to start watching tape. We haven't watched any. Then that's where they are, just because of they thought Cameron Rising was in the bag. And that's why and that's the impression I got from everybody. And that's why I had been so confident the last few weeks. But the thing is, and people say, oh, well, they weren't paying attention. The Texas people I talked to were surprised. I didn't talk to anybody at Orange Bloods that were like, oh, yeah, we'd heard about this. They were all like, this is completely out of left damn field.
Yeah,
like,
this was a Hail Mary at the end of the game. This was like nothing. They had just written it off as, yeah, he's going to OU, and we got Casey Thompson.
Well, and exactly, when it came the week after the Casey Thompson thing, it felt like, well, he'd scheduled to make that trip. His dad and Herman are friends. That it felt obligatory, like, well, we're just going to do it anyway. But there was no one that thought anything was coming of that trip. Nobody. So, I think it's just one of those things that and that's what's so crazy about all this stuff with R.J. Henderson and Theo Weiss and Cameron Rising, and then the weekend before with Bryce Bray and Josh Proctor and Scott Pagano. They're not connected. People, like I had a bunch of people last night, what do we not know, Josh? What's happening in OU football that hasn't out there for public yet? It's not that. There's nothing like that happening. It's just these situations that have all come to a head at a very similar time. And some of it has to do with, guys taking trips this time of year. Josh Proctor committed to Ohio State while he was in Columbus. Bryce Bray committed to Oklahoma State while he was in Stillwater. Cameron Rising took the Texas trip to go to their spring game. It's more of that than anything's, seedy or, these kids know something bad or unhappy with OU. I still think OU is going to have the best chance of anybody to sign Theo Weiss. He just he committed 2.5 years, or I guess a little under 2 years before he can announce or before he can sign his letter of intent. Man, that's crazy early. I wouldn't do that. I don't blame him for backing away from it. It's just, kind of a question of, well, if that would have never happened, I don't think there'd be all this angst about it.
It was all just kind of it was like the cherry on top when you lose 2019 kids. And I think that everybody, I think the biggest problem is that everybody thought that, and we kind of look back and the same thing happened in, I guess, 2012, just in that a lot of people thought that after winning the second in a row Big 12 championship, winning another Sugar Bowl, I think beating another SEC team. I think a lot of people thought that they were going to be able to build on this and
facilities coming in. Right.
And I think that they did in a way. I think this entire week to 10 days has really kind of taken some luster off of it. My first thought, though, when I saw that Rising had committed, if I'm Casey Thompson, I want to fight him right now.
But maybe
Why does it always come to violence with you, Eddie?
Because that's bullshit. If I'm the quarterback, I'm the quarterback in that class. I don't know. I guess
that's how it usually operates these days.
Yeah, it's
I'm not
weird.
sticking around if I'm Casey Thompson. I mean, he tweeted out, offered Oregon last night. I gotta think, I've tried to reach out to Charles, his father. Haven't had a chance to catch up with him yet to see how that. I think they just want to let things settle down. But it's clear, it's not cool right now to commit to Texas and then have another quarterback commit. Because I'm sure when they were telling Kate, I'm sure they used some of the, Oklahoma didn't want you. They took Cameron Rising instead. So we want you. We want you to be our coach. And then they take Cameron Rising a week later.
It's unbelievable, but it kind of goes in line with my thoughts on Tom Herman as a human being. So,
how in the world did they do that, though? How did they recruit 2 quarterbacks at once? We talk all the time about how quarterbacks want to make sure they come into this great, perfect situation that's for them.
Their quarterbacks must really stink in that spring game. I mean, and Josh, I know this has been talked about, but at Oklahoma, you've got Baker Mayfield for one more year, then you're going to have Kyler Murray. You've got Austin Kendall, you got Chris Robinson. I have to think that probably every one of those quarterbacks got a lot of reps in the spring game. Chris Robinson led the team on a scoring drive. Kyler Murray did some really good things. I think Austin Kendall was probably the guy that you really didn't stand out to you. But I would imagine that, you looked at it, if you're Cameron Rising, you thought, man, they've got a really good quarterback situation here all of a sudden.
I think that's absolutely right. And kind of the point you just made, Kerry, when I talked to some people kind of, how did this happen? Was there any indication that things were going wrong? The first thing I heard was Kyler Murray. I didn't hear Austin Kendall. I didn't hear Chris Robinson. I thought that was really interesting that basically they saw how good Kyler Murray looked in that game, and it ran him off a little bit, or at least backed him away. And I think Rising had thought prior to that he was going to come in and have a really legitimate chance to start. And I think when he saw Kyler Murray, he knew that's probably not going to happen. And not that I'm sure that Kyler Murray is going to start, but just that Murray, Kendall, Robinson all have a huge head start on him. And I think getting a chance to watch those guys in person and be like, and damn, they're really good. It's one thing, like Shane Buechele and Sam Ehlinger at Texas have a head start, but I think we know Shane Buechele is a guy with a limited ceiling. I mean, he's a decent player, and he can be okay.
He's a guy with a nice deep ball.
Yeah, he's never going to be Big 12 Player of the Year. With any 3 of those guys, and with Lincoln Riley as the offensive coordinator, I wouldn't rule it out for any of them. So
now, am I wrong in this? In that Lincoln, I thought I remember that Lincoln basically kind of just shooed him away, right? Buechele.
Yeah,
that's not who I want.
That was Heupel's guy.
Yeah.
I actually late in that season, in Josh's final year at OU, I went to see Buechele because I figured that's who they were going to end up with, and Josh was at the game. We bumped into each other, talked for a little bit, and I think it was pretty clear Shane was the guy he had identified as the guy he wanted. But when Riley got there, to my understanding, OU, I don't know that they were like, hey, we don't want you. I think they just kind of washed their hands and walked away, and he had that connection to Austin Kendall, so it worked out pretty naturally.
I guess the next point to go to, Josh, is just Carrie, I guess you can come in on this too, is you hit on it last night, is what is happening. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, hell, I even got texts from people I don't even know, like
just random numbers.
Yeah, like what the F is going on in Norman right now. And, I think that even going back into the last couple of weeks is just the fact that I think that a lot of times I think people see this bad news and then automatically think, oh God, something awful is happening down there. As in, is Bob Stoops retiring? Or what is going on down there? When you talk about negative recruiting, what is exactly happening, or what do we think is happening?
I think it's a combination of what Josh said earlier, which is Bryce Bray committed when he was in Stillwater. Josh Proctor committed when he was at Oklahoma State or Ohio State. Pagano just chose Oregon, which I think a lot of people thought he would go west from the beginning. The rising thing is crazy. Now, I think with losing your entire 2019 class over 2 days, I think that is kind of where the Sharks kind of started to get in the water a little bit and say, hey, look at what's going on at OU. Something's just not right. Look at all the problems they've had with discipline. Hey, this Feinbaum guy, he's out there saying that Bob Stoops has lost control of his program. Do you really want to be a part of that? Maybe you should, stop and think about things a little bit. I mean, I do believe that some of that's going on.
How is that different than any other time that it's happened, though? I mean, I guess they're
sophomores. I mean, they're the best people to, and you don't attack them, you attack their parents, probably. Mm-hmm. Who, you really want to send your kids to Oklahoma right now? Look at they just had a kid there that robbed people at gunpoint.
And I guess from their point of view, too, is you don't even have to get them to flip at that moment. All you have to do is just open that door back up.
And that's what you want to do, yeah.
Yep. And the thing is, you don't even necessarily have to go, I guess, negative in the in the definition that we would most think of as, oh, look at this and this and this, and you document anything. Just say, well, that's 3 guys in 3 days. Something must be wrong down there. You don't even have, you just kind of put innuendo out there and then let a 16, 17-year-old kid let their imagination run wild.
Could part of it be that this stuff came together too quickly, that there was too much, I don't know if that's even possible, but too much momentum following that Sugar Bowl and that finish last year, that everybody just thought that Sooner Squad 17, everything was going to continue, and you had Rising jump on board, you had Walker, you had this big class, you had the 2 2019 guys, and then all of a sudden when there were any kind of problems, any kind of a bad stretch for OU, there wasn't a strong foundation for those relationships for those guys to fall back on, so that when anytime the waters got a little shaky, they just abandoned ship. There wasn't enough of a long-term relationship built with some of these guys. Is that part of the problem, Josh?
I think it is. You look at that 2017 group, the foundation, Robert Barnes, Justin Broyles, Levi Draper. You go down the list, and those were guys that were out there in all the camps, and they were seeing a lot of guys. Plus, you throw in the obvious bonus that they were from an area that ran into each other a lot. Oklahoma City, Dallas, Cedarian Lamb and Houston. There was a lot of chances for these guys to run into one another. Well, right now you've got TJ Pledger, who's from Florida, Jordan Austin, who can't camp or do anything. He showed up at a few events, but he's not fully healthy yet, so he can't do anything. Pat Fields and Jordan Kelly. Pat Fields is the only guy in the group right now that, to me, feels like he would have fit in that 2017 group as far as the way they went about putting their class together, and we're going to be proactive, and we're going to do all this together. Pat is that kind of guy. He's very Justin Broyles-ish.
Yes, that's exactly
Jordan
what he
Kelly is just kind of a quiet, reserved kid.
Yeah, we lost Josh. Give me just a second, unless we lost our internet.
While you're hooking back up with Josh, I'll just kind of talk about Patrick Fields, and that when I went and did his interview at, I forgot where I was now, Owasso High School, right before he committed to Oklahoma, that was the first thing that I thought about, was he is an extension of Justin Broyles. He's almost the exact same personality. I don't think anybody can match the personality of Justin Broyles, but he's certainly close. And so it's going to be interesting to see who that next guy is in this class, because I don't necessarily see a guy like a a Bray Walker being that type of guy.
Bray Walker seems like he's committed to Oklahoma, but that's like a business decision for him. Whereas Patrick Fields, it feels familial. Like that's part of his life now, is that he's an Oklahoma commit. And like Justin, he's going to make sure that he talks to people about it, brings more people on board. I think Patrick also is going to be someone that's really easy for people to root for. He's a guy that he was telling me he mows lawns during the summer and stuff like that to make money. He always has a job. He's always working. He's somebody that just, I think he's really connected with the Oklahoma culture that they've built there, and his family's OU fans. I think he's someone that people are really going to like Justin Broyles a year ago. Although Justin has an energy that I just don't think anybody can match, and that's nothing against Patrick, but Justin is just such a people person that I don't know if there's going to be anybody like that in this class. Have we got Josh back?
No.
All right.
Still filling.
Everybody panic. All right, we do have Josh McCuistion back now, and Josh, Eddie was talking. We were all talking about just the fact that really Patrick Fields is the only person like a Justin Broyles, and you don't have a Chris Robinson, a quarterback that can kind of close by. I mean, Cameron Rising was way out west, so it wasn't exactly hangout time. I mean, the way that he and Bryce Walker hung out on the field Saturday, it was almost like you could tell they really hadn't had a chance to talk to each other a whole lot. But I'd love to get Bryce Walker's feelings on this thing too.
Right?
Or no,
Bray Walker.
Bray Walker. Bryce Bray on the mind. But yeah, Bray Walker. The way they were hanging out and stuff. I mean, it was just like they spent a lot of time together and talked a lot, and that was probably the first time they'd really had a chance to bond at all before he screwed it all up.
The first thing that I thought of when I guess I'll be honest, when I sobered up after the Rising news, I was on a bachelor party over the weekend. So
you were already drunk when it happened.
Oh yeah, very. I was at a strip club too, I think. I hope none of the wives listen to this. But the biggest thing that I thought of was
whose wives? Your wives?
No, the guys I was with.
Oh yeah.
We might need to edit that out. The biggest thing though that I thought about when it fully set in was just the fact that how much Lincoln Riley talked about on National Signing Day a year ago, how important it is to get that quarterback to be that foundation of a recruiting class. And now that this is gone, is this not the first hiccup in the Lincoln Riley era as far as recruiting?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that it's definitely, I don't think it's going to spin into something that he can't recover from, but this is kind of the first speed bump that he's going to have to face since he arrived at Oklahoma 3 years ago.
I think it's a great point about Lincoln Riley talking on signing day about the importance of getting that quarterback early and making sure you get him as kind of the central point of your class where you can work around. And I guess the question is now, among the other things, like 2019 can wait. Those guys you can recruit again for a long time. But 2018 quarterback, that Cameron Rising news is a more immediate impact than the others. Oklahoma has to make a decision now on quarterback. And so I know, Josh, you put out an article on the board about where OU might go next. Do you have any better feel today where that move is, what direction they're going to go now?
I really don't. And I think to me, and I know OU fans will get upset about it. I think it's a credit to Lincoln Riley that he's not just running out there and trying to make some rash decision, because like I said, everything I've heard tells me they don't have much information on 2018 quarterbacks right now. They're going to have to look at some things, try to figure out who's going to be their guy, because they just down. Lincoln Riley was, what he said on signing day wasn't just, the stuff you hear coaches so often. It was real. When he shut it down, or when Cameron Rising said, "Hey, I'm coming," he said, "Okay, I'm good and I'm done here." And that's been all they've done. I know pretty definitively that Spencer Sanders was a guy that everybody got excited about because Lincoln Riley followed him, I think, even Saturday night right after that Cameron Rising situation came out. But I can tell you that Oklahoma didn't know a lot about him. So, there's a lot of boxes they've got to check. He's going to get out and hit the road. I saw that he was in New Orleans recently. There's some guys in the, one of the guys I mentioned was James Foster, the Missouri commitment from Alabama. Wouldn't shock me at all if while he's down there, he makes a trip over and takes a look at him. There's a lot of ways they can go with this. And frankly, there's a lot of good options still available. I think Tanner McKee, another L.A. area guy, is really interesting. A Rivals 250 quarterback, number 8 pro-style guy in the country. And you look at his offer list, that seems like a guy Oklahoma could get involved with and really make a quick run at.
I think what's going to be interesting is, these coaches, people act like, this coaching staff, they've lost it. It's just a virus that's spread throughout from Tim Kish on, and now Lincoln Riley's lost it, and this program's going under. I think one thing about this program right now, they haven't lost what there is to sell. And I almost think that it's like the reason that they started going out to California in the first place is because Mac Brown had Texas so locked down, they had to find players from other areas of the country. Like, they weren't going to get they were only going to get a handful of the best players in Texas because of the guys they wanted. So they went out to California. Now they have more to sell in Norman than they've ever had before. These facilities are amazing that they're almost ready to finish. Now, there's not a kid from Florida, from LA, from West Coast, from all the way back east, wherever. There's not a kid, Josh, that you can't bring in and wow with what they've got going on at OU right now, I don't think.
No, and that's even more true in California because, that's what we've always talked about, and part of why I've always felt like OU has such success in California is because there's such an apathy towards college football in the Pac-12 region that they come to Norman and they're like, this is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And now not only does Oklahoma have the atmosphere to sell, they have the stuff that stacks up with any major program in the country from a facility standpoint.
Well, and I wonder, because this staff does get motivated when stuff like this happens. They want to compete. This gets under your skin. I wonder if they don't. We saw them going into Georgia and making all those offers the other day, but I wonder if they don't start trying to turn over some rocks and say, screw the SEC country. Let's see what we can do. Let's. And you don't want to turn your wheels and waste time doing stuff, but man, I think that they're in a better position now to be able to maybe win some of those battles that they've had problems with winning in the past.
It's amazing how cyclical all this stuff is, because after Jacob Phillips decommitted, who was really kind of the first thorn, I guess, to start the whole year of 20.
So now we're going all the way back to Jacob Phillips.
Well, I'm just saying it's interesting that you go back to that and it's like, well, OU needs to get out of the SEC, or not out of the SEC, but look what happened when they
stop being in those murky waters.
Right. And now it's like, well, maybe you can go back in there. I don't know.
And Lincoln Riley being in Louisiana,
New Orleans.
Maybe he hits up a couple of guys. There's a pretty good chance that LSU, if you get involved with Louisiana, there's a decent chance that LSU lays a stinker this year.
Oh, very much so. Look at their quarterback just had minor back surgery. There aren't any minor back surgeries in America anymore.
And as good as Ed Orgeron is as a recruiter, he's never been a head coach that just put out a bunch of good football teams. So, if you're banking on him putting out a great team, I don't see where that evidence is. And they also did pull Trey Sermon out of Georgia a year ago. So
that's a good point.
They're not afraid to dip into SEC country now. And I think that point's a good one by Kerry, that they are fired up right now, that this is a prideful bunch, and that I think they take this far harder than fans do, and I know fans are taking this one tough. So I think they're going to be motivated to go out and see what they can turn over. And I don't know what you do now if you're Oklahoma, other than nothing's changed. Like Kerry said, they have the same things to sell. They have the same record they had a year ago. They're still coming off a Sugar Bowl. They're still getting in new facilities. So I guess
you're still beating the SEC.
They're still not losing to Kansas. So I don't know how they don't. That stuff's got to be frustrating when you're doing all those things and this stuff happens. But I assume you just stay the course, right? You can't go too crazy one way or the other.
And not to mention what Mississippi's going through right now, Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. You tell me that you can't maybe get in there in Mississippi a little bit right now?
Well, and it certainly helps that, we talked about Patrick Fields being a vocal leader of this class. I think TJ Pledger, for the most part, you've kind of started to see that form as well.
That was one text I got last night from somebody. I'll just say somebody big. They're like, oh, what's going to happen next? Is TJ Pledger going to decommit?
That would have been, that's one of those things that's like, that happens. I joked with you guys earlier. I might go into witness protection if that happens in the next month.
Ready Adolfo Vic?
Might just move to Louisiana. I was going to say, with Ed Orgeron, I think there's a better chance of him being linked to 5 dead bodies than winning the national championship this year.
Maybe.
I feel like he could be a character on True Detective season 1.
To me,
True
it's
Detective
just, for
Soprano
LSU,
edition.
it's all about, is Matt Canada as good as everybody thinks he is? Like, I think he's pretty good, but I don't know. We'll see. But, you guys were talking a little bit about the SEC, and while you were talking, it gave me a little time to look at it. Last year, Oklahoma signed 6 players from SEC states. If and that's talking about like Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana. You go down to Georgia, like you mentioned with Trey Sermon. So you go down the list. The SEC was not bad to Oklahoma last year. I mean, they got some talent out of those areas.
You just feel like they work as Jacob Phillips at the end.
Yeah, but that's all. And that's what people are like. Oh, everything's falling apart. You still have 2 of the top 35 players in the country. Like, it's not that bad. Breathe a little bit. And that's where And the thing I would tell you, in all likelihood, you have gotten about 60% of OU's bad news, like truly bad news in recruiting, out of the way in a week. Like, you just rip that scab off, and now it don't get me wrong, things bad will come down the line in this class. It's not going to all go the way you want it to, but as far as losing commitments and all this sort of stuff, it should be mostly over just because the mathematics back that up. There's not going to be 2 commitments left out of the guys that currently are standing. That's just not the way that's going to go. There's some positive.
This program really needs from here on out. First off, number 1, don't get any more trouble off the field through the offseason. Keep your noses clean. That's number 1. Number 2, and this is massively, if you want a chance of having a top 5 recruiting class next year, this is probably your only shot. Beat Ohio State on the road. If you do that, and you're working really hard trying to hit all these, like we're saying, you go out and you try and really work these areas really hard. You got the facilities. You beat Ohio State, you are going to be now in the running for the national championship. And there shouldn't be, even a Josh Proctor, who is in Owasso, there's no reason to think that you can't possibly flip that kid if you go out and do that.
And speaking of TJ Pledger, he's at IMG Academy. If you keep that connection, I mean, if you beat Ohio State and you have TJ Pledger there and you go hardcore into IMG Academy, that's a great place to get some players. There are multiple guys there that are big time that Oklahoma's in on. And even in the next class, there's Noah Kane at running back. So I think that if you can go into some places that you couldn't before if you beat Ohio State. Now, if they lose to Ohio State, you maybe go back to Texas somewhere. I think part of the reason they also went to California, Kerry, was because Baylor was coming up, and Texas Tech was even stealing some guys, and it feels like, and Texas A&M going to the SEC became this hot thing, and now all of a sudden, all those teams aren't what they were. Baylor's not what they were. Texas A&M's not what they were. I think Oklahoma can get that footprint back in Texas, especially if Herman's eye is going to start wandering off to California and being a more national recruiter. I think that's a possibility, that maybe Texas is the place to go to.
Well, that's step 3 is to kick the snot out of Texas.
Start kicking onsides at the beginning of the game. Don't even let them get on offense.
Maybe do a lot of fake punts.
Or if you just want to make a statement, just Bob Stoops, just hit Herman in the face right at midfield, right before the game starts. Instead of a handshake, just attack him.
I am really interested to see how... That's too far. I'm really interested to see how this relationship develops, because Bob had been asked several times, like, what do you know of Tom Herman? And he was kind of like, I don't know anything about Tom Herman. Like, he wasn't, there's no tree there, there's no connection there. It does kind of set itself up for a nice little coaching rivalry.
I think it's great. I completely disagree with the sentiment on the board that you don't want Texas to be good if you're Oklahoma. I think that's more of just an OU fan trying to dog on Texas rather than...
Yeah, look how hard it is to get to the national championship if Texas is not good, especially with Baylor down. Baylor's not... I don't think Matt Rule's going to do jack squat at Baylor. I really
you haven't
don't.
been a big fan of that at all.
I mean, he might beat Iowa State and Kansas, with his ball control crap, but he is not going to compete for Big 12 titles running that stuff. I don't care. By the way, good on you, Jalen Hurd. That's exactly who you want running your power. He's
going to play wide receiver. That's what the word is.
30 catches.
That's 30 catches. Woo.
And that
I
offense.
think that's high.
How many arrests?
He has a problem with problems off the field, does he?
Well, that's more of the school he's at.
Who's the coach that Stoops has hated the most over the years? Was it Les Miles back when he was at Oklahoma State? Could Tom Herman be
pretty high up there?
Be the new Les Miles? Because he beat Oklahoma when he was an underdog in Houston and moving on to a more prestigious job. Kind of Ellis. There's a Les Miles kind of parallel there.
It's got to be Art Briles, doesn't it?
Yeah,
That's a
it
good
is
one.
definitely
Yeah.
Art
They-
Briles.
Yeah.
They had some real beef for a while there with Baylor.
Yeah, it was never hard to get Bob to kind of not really go off on Art, but just to give him the massive stink eye anytime you'd ask about it.
Well, name another moment when he did something like the trophies in the when they did the press conference. I can't think of Bob doing anything like that.
Baylor
ever.
made their little table talking about their championships, and then OU shot back like this is what a real championship trophy case looks like or whatever.
Yep.
I know for a fact that Briles, after the Julian Wilson-Mike Stoops game, walked off the field saying some not great things about Oklahoma that people remembered.
Baylor put a Russell Athletic Bowl trophy on that table, I remember. It's just
Sounds
sad.
about right.
I'm sad.
Speaking of which,
Well, you guys love the Russell Athletic Bowl.
yeah,
I didn't even let Eddie go.
Luckily, I didn't have to go. It's like the one. I think that's.
They had no media availability.
Yeah.
Like it was
really
just
bad.
stupid.
You missed-
And they got their asses kicked.
you missed an all-time performance by Cole Stout.
Oh, it was flashbacks.
Speaking of
This really is the dark podcast.
speaking of Russell Athletic Bowl trophies and people taking moral
Now
victories,
it's a Camping World trophy.
where do we come down on Oklahoma State's rings and the record Mike Gundy threw on there?
Did you expect
Awful.
anything else?
Awful.
It was bad, but if you're gonna,
I don't care. I like Mike Gundy.
yeah,
I like him.
So I was gonna say, if you're gonna go all in on just not giving any Fs, might as well.
If you're gonna cancel your subscription, sorry, I'm gonna say it. I like Mike Gundy.
Oh, I
The
like.
mullet. I mean, the
Yeah,
Big Daddy mug. I mean, I would hate to cover him because I think he can be kind of a jerk, but I think that now that he's gotten over the whole, if anything, it makes you hate Mike Holder more and Boone Pickens more. And I love just seeing him be able to kind of stick it to them, especially after what happened with their basketball coach.
I agree.
That's still weak, though.
But knew it would happen. I mean, they made Big 12 South rings.
They celebrated a national championship from 1945. Of course, they're gonna put 11-2 on their.
My brother was so mad at me. He's an OSU grad. And he got really mad at me because I said something on the board or something, or on the radio, and people, my brother is like really big on the OSU rivals board. And so people know that we're brothers, and they went over there and like, Carrie said that it wasn't a legitimate championship. And my brother calls me all mad, and he goes, did you really say it's not a legitimate national championship? I said, yes, it's not. And he like wouldn't speak to me for like a week and a half. But he was like, but the coaches awarded it. I said, not the ones that awarded that trophy are all dead.
Yeah, it's bad.
I'd love to have a podcast of just you and your brother going at it.
I
The
wouldn't.
Bedlam podcast.
Yeah, that'd be great. Be absolutely great.
He can't come over.
Why
He's not allowed. He's not welcome.
We get into some personal beef?
No, it's fine. He just can't come over. So now that you've got me completely off my game,
You're welcome.
the rings, yeah, I don't care. I mean, the refs did screw him out of a win. That play shouldn't have happened.
That's still a dumb play call.
And they did screw him out of a win, but it doesn't change
OU
what
admitted
your
they have
record
the same
is.
play in their playbook.
Yeah, but they throw it to a receiver that runs a route.
But still,
You should have a receiver in the area.
the game
They got
ends.
screwed.
The game ends, even though it's grounding. The game ends.
So
In the rule book, the ref screwed it up. I don't have a problem with it. I just don't.
So Bob Stoops counted the win in
I
Oregon?
mean, I had a bigger problem when
They
they
lost
made
that game.
Big 12 South co-champion rings.
Yeah. Oh,
When
no.
they lost to OU, and then OU went on to, was that 2010 when they played Nebraska? But OSU still made rings. I had a bigger problem with that than a 10-3 versus 11-2 ring.
See, and to me, that's just as stupid as OU claiming that Big 12 title when K-State beat them in Norman.
Yeah, and
You got
that
beat on
banner
your
doesn't
home
say
field,
Big
man.
12 co-champs either. It just says
you
Big
were
12
not.
champs.
No, you're not champs. You're just not. So, I know that'll piss people off, but that's one of my. I don't get that.
Weak is
like
weak.
if
Well, what was weird about that? You remember, Eddie? They did a private celebration on the field. Like, they didn't tell us in the media, like, we're going to have a trophy presentation. It was like they almost wanted to do it under the cover of darkness. So Bob Bowlesby didn't have to take crap from K-State for awarding
that down
the
in
trophy.
Fort Worth?
It was it was at TCU, yeah.
That was shady and shitty.
But we all know it's about recruiting.
Oh yeah, you can send those pictures to everybody.
Auburn gave themselves Sugar Bowl rings. It didn't say we lost it. It just said Sugar Bowl.
That's participation at its finest right there. Is Auburn giving out rings for losing in a bowl game?
the worst is Kentucky. Kentucky gave out bowl rings
lost
for
the
losing.
bowl game.
Wasn't it the Russell Athletic Bowl?
Yes, they lost the bowl game.
Kentucky's done some stuff lately that has made me think that Mark Stoops needs to. He might not be getting invited to the family dinner or the
He just gave him
what's
Jeff
it called?
Badet.
Jeff Badet is a consolation prize.
Yeah,
He's gold.
They did something else though that was just like, that's not good.
I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody, but as dumb as kids appear to be, I don't blame coaches for doing anything anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they don't care. They don't do it. Nobody fact checks anything or double checks or anything. Just like, oh, you did that? Okay, cool. You were national champions last year.
State
We'll go
champions.
play for you.
They're going to start calling state champions and.
Now the fans care about the state champion stuff. Like I always
Of course
thought it was
they do,
cool
because they wanna
I
talk
thought it was
shit to the
cool
person
back
that
in
they
the
work
day
with.
when like James Allen was the running back and OU beat A&M and Texas, and I think they played Tech that year. Maybe they played TCU, but they had they made up state champ, Texas state champion T-shirts, and I always thought, oh, that's cool.
Houston did that.
Like I was a student then.
I remember this.
Yeah, I think so.
The Six Flags Over Texas shirt was pretty cool. I think that was the 2000 season where they had 6 wins in Texas. That stuff's cool.
I mean, guys, fans don't understand how nauseating it can be to deal with these high school kids sometimes, and that's not their fault. I was a stupid ass kid too. I'm not trying to make anybody out, they are so much worse than this generation. That's just classic old people crap. But the thing that to put it in perspective, and I told you guys this story, we'll leave the names out to protect the innocent, but I literally had a kid recently tell me that what might go into his decision about 2 schools he was choosing between was who texted him the most the day before his announcement. Who says that? Do you know how stupid you're going to sound if I run that quote? That's awful.
It's bad enough to where I could see the school that he committed to, if that got out, going, yeah, it's okay, you can choose that other school now.
Mm-hmm. That it blows my mind, some of the stuff these kids, I don't know if it's the things that they say more or if it's just the things that they do more now. And it kind of even goes back to kids that are highly 4-star rated kids, or low, I'm not going to say low 5 stars, but highly rated kids in the 250 or in with offers from 25 or 35 or 45 schools that have it in their mind that they're still the underdog and that they got to keep grinding in the summer to get all this attention. It's just bullshit. I hate it.
They're just so short-sighted, it feels like. I mean, we talked to Theo Weiss in Dallas, and he was talking about how he was going to be the biggest recruiter for OU and that he wanted to win a national championship in Norman. What is it, less than a month later? He's already decommitted. I mean, how much really was he thinking about Oklahoma and that decision? Or is that just kind of, that sounded good to him at the moment?
I think it's part of those things, if I say this, I'm going to get more love on Twitter.
Right, exactly, yeah. It's momentary.
Playing to the crowd.
And I think Theo's a good kid. I really do. I think he's 16.
I was a dumbass at
big
16.
picture when you're you guys know you've all dealt with a lot of recruits. There's a few guys you're like, man, that.
I'll say this. I can only imagine when I was 16.
it might.
I'm sorry, Josh, you're cutting out on us there. I don't know if you can hear.
Oh no! I stopped. I heard you talking, so
I started talking because I'm sorry, but I was just saying I can only imagine at 16. Like I was a baseball player, but I wasn't. I played football still, but I knew I was going to play baseball past high school. I can't imagine if like back in those days, like if OSU and Georgia, when I was 16, like if I had scholarships from all those schools, like UCLA or I can't even remember who all LSU was really good then, like. How much of a moron and an idiot I would have been if I knew no matter what I did, I was going to have the best schools in the country giving me a scholarship to college. I would have been insufferable.
And then think about what Eddie Radosevich would have been like.
Oh, I would have straight up told people, if you're not paying me, I'm not interested.
Eddie would have come to the school every day like with a El Camino with a tub in the back of it.
Do you know what Eddie would be like? He'd be like the riders that bands have when they show up to concert venues. Like, I'm going to have this in my room, and I want this. Or you can just give me $7,000, and we'll call it square. Like, that would be Eddie on an official visit.
And two of your finest co-eds.
Exactly. Oh, there would be hookers for sure.
Oh, I would have been the kid that went to Kentucky.
Is it Louisville?
Or Louisville. What was his name?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Are you talking about Jesus Shuttlesworth?
No. The big screw-up kid that I actually feel bad comparing myself
He
to.
got all the trouble with Patino.
No. The football player.
Oh.
The kid that was at the Rivals event.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh.
God.
That thing we're not supposed to talk
several
about?
years ago, right, Eddie?
Yeah. Are we not supposed to talk
The kid
about
from
it?
Kentucky.
I was thinking of something else.
That had the awful name, and he was terrible. And now he's
Quarterback.
coming over drug problems. What the hell is that kid?
Yeah, Pike.
Yeah, Zeke Pike.
Yeah, Zeke Pike.
I actually think he tried to commit suicide, so I kind of feel sad for that part of it. But
I think he went to Auburn.
Auburn, that's it. And then he
did.
went to like 5 or 6 schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he did end up transferring to Louisville and was there for like a semester, and it didn't. And his problems just
I
kind
would
of
have been out
followed
of
him
control.
Eddie should have been destined to be a Barry Switzer recruit, like in the 70s or 80s.
That would have been awesome.
That would have been right in his wheelhouse.
I think Eddie would have had gold teeth.
I might.
In the Switzer era, you didn't have gold teeth, I don't think. Just for minks and
Oh,
stuff.
so many mink coats. That would have been awesome.
And you would have had a special haircut.
Is there anybody like that in college football now? Is there a Boz left? Is there somebody who has that kind of...
I think Baker's about as close as you can get.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's because we deal with them every day. But, I mean, Stryker was a little bit like that just with
Yeah.
the mouth.
Yeah.
It's a difficult balance, especially after Johnny Manziel. Like,
Yeah, because now if you're outlandish and a lot like Baker and you have one screw up, you're going to be labeled as the guy that is a troublemaker.
well, I'm sure there were, after Bosworth, I'm sure it was taboo for anybody to be brash and outlandish for a while there.
I'm trying to think if there's anybody during those Nebraska years. I'm sure there was. I mean, Lawrence Phillips like that, or
He was just a troublemaker.
Yeah,
just a
he wasn't
straight up
really-
bad guy.
He was just a felon.
Gronk wasn't like Gronk when he was at Arizona.
No,
right?
no.
That was a New England thing that came out of him.
He may have been, but who the hell would know?
Yeah, that's true. Tim Kish.
Tim Kish could speak to the Gronk. You're right.
That would be a good question to ask him sometime.
if we ever got to talk to him.
I've requested him so many times. Let me say this. Just kind of breaking down spring and what we learned. We just finished. God, it was last week, I guess, when OU finished. And I did have a chance to kind of talk to Mike and Bob. And, we hadn't really had a chance to talk to him about that middle linebacker because that was Kenneth Murray's third practice, the red and white game. And it does really sound like they feel like he's going to be able to stay at that position at middle linebacker. Like they saw enough progress in those last 5 practices to say this is going to work. Because Mike told me he's going to stay there throughout the offseason. He's going to be there when fall camp starts. And he and John Michael Terry, I think they feel good about that position. And when we start talking about you have to beat Ohio State, they have to be good at middle linebacker in order for this defense to be. I still don't know about him up front. I still don't know about that 4-man defensive tackle position. We'll see on Lampkin. He's supposed to be back. He didn't end up practicing at all in the spring. Supposed to be back ready for the summer. But man, if Will Sunderland just comes along, this could be one of the better secondaries that they've had, maybe the best since the spread has kind of taken over. Having Parnell Motley, Jordan Parker, Jordan Thomas seem to have a really good spring, but there is a chance, and I know people are going to kill me for saying this, I believe there's a chance for this to be a really good defense next year.
How much a year changes? Because last year, Will Johnson was seen as kind of this X factor on the defense, and now I don't know how he gets on the field with the guys they have in that secondary. There's so much more.
Judging by last year, I don't know he should get on the field.
Especially in the
Does
Ohio
he even
State
get
game.
to travel to Columbus? He shouldn't even be on the plane.
Well, that's the other thing. Are they going to be able to do this thing where Caleb Kelly moves inside to keep him on the field? Because that's, to me, that's a little risky. Not risky from the term of, you always want to have him on the field, but if he's going to have to play some middle linebacker, I just wonder if he can do it.
Are you keeping him on the field and in actuality hurting yourself because you're forcing him to stay on the field? I mean, is that the conundrum that they're in?
Well, it's clear to me he's not going to be a defensive lineman. He's not going to line up with his hand on the ground on the edge. Like, he won't replace DJ Ward in any situations. Right. But if they go to, if they have to go to a nickel, he gets eliminated with the position that he is. So moving him inside is the only option for them. I don't know if that works. I don't see how it works.
Or when they go to a nickel, they just make sure it's a 3-man front.
But they're not going to put him on the ground. They're not going to put his hand on the ground.
I just don't see how you can.
They don't want to play him as a defensive end. They don't think they can.
They can't. You can't make the same mistake they made with Devontae Bond of not having him on the field. You have to find a way. You have to get creative. There's only so many players of that caliber on campus. You have to get your best players on the field.
But you have to look at it this way. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh, because I know you're trying to get.
No. If you go 3 down, you don't necessarily have to take him off to have a nickel. It's just going to
you'll move him inside,
right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. Like his alignment will be a little different. You're right, but I mean, it's not necessarily like he's playing Mike or anything.
Well, he will be, but I mean, the thing is, you're playing Mike against a pass formation. You're not playing Mike against a 2 tight end set. If that ever happens, they're going to have 4 linebackers on the field, or at least 3, with Obo or DJ Ward. I mean, that's the thing. I mean. And you know what? If John Michael Terry, he looks athletic. Kenneth Murray is super athletic. If those guys come along and you have to take him off the field for passing situations, I mean, it doesn't kill you. But it's just, it is a shame to take that much talent off the field.
I was going to say, I'm not accepting any answer that has him coming off the field.
Yeah.
Like, you got to find a way.
But that way is for him to move inside.
Yep.
In passing situations.
And you're right. I mean, like, he's not going to be the player there that he is outside, but which linebacker, I don't care how good you think they may be, who do you think now, like, well, he's a better player than a 85% of Caleb Kelly?
No, I agree. 100%.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I know you're a huge fan of his, so I know. That's just, I mean, to me, that's what it comes down to is, he may be lessened, but lessened Caleb Kelly still might be your best defensive player.
I'm interested to see how he comes along as a pass rusher because I think we all know what to expect from Obo. I think he could be the Big 12 preseason defensive player of the year. He's going to be OU's biggest threat to rush the passer.
Yep.
Who's going to be number 2? Who's going to be the guy like Geno Grissom in the Sugar Bowl against Alabama that forces that pocket close? Who's somebody that can be number 2? Is it Caleb Kelly? Who is that guy?
It's DJ Ward.
That's not who you want it to be, though, right?
Well, I mean,
that's a bad answer. If
he's not playing head up anymore, though. He's playing out on the edge. So he's a guy that now has a chance to shade that tackle when he never had that opportunity. We don't know. I mean, I don't think he's Obo, but they seem to be really pleased. I mean, Eddie, you've been around when they talk about it. They seem to feel like he's made a huge jump this spring.
Yeah, and I think that it's helped that, I guess the only thing that has helped his cause is that they are moving to a different defense and that we can't say that it won't work because we haven't seen it work yet.
Now, it could be Addison Gums. It could be Mark Jackson if they want to move him over that side. And when Obo is back, you'd be an idiot not to play those 2 guys over on the right side to see what they could do.
What about Neville Gallimore?
I just don't I mean, he's gonna have his opportunity to rush the passer just from the inside.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of like DJ Ward too, where we're not quite sure yet to see what he's going to be like as a 3 technique. We think that it's going to be better for him.
He could be a guy that is second in the team and QB hurries or tackles, tackles for a loss, sacks.
Yeah, see, I see him as a big TFL guy. Yeah, he'll collect those numbers.
Well, either way, I mean, we've talked about it thousands of times. Whatever they do, it has to be better than it was last year as far as getting pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, and that's why they
finding
made this
ways
change,
to get quarterback.
Yeah. Well, 2 reasons I think Josh can talk to this. 2 reasons why they made the change. One is they need more pressure. The other is it's just been killing them in recruiting on interior defensive linemen with this system that they're running.
Trying to sell a 3-4 to kids, knowing that
they're not making plays in that defense.
Right.
Oh, yeah, guys. I mean, make no mistake, Marvin Wilson wanted to hear he was a 3 technique. Now, he's almost certainly a 1 technique, and I don't think he has to be a 0, but the reality is if Marvin Wilson had come to OU, he'd have been a 0 in the former defense. I mean, that's just the way that would have gone. And that's a certain mentality because, we're talking about Neville Gallimore and tackles for loss. Man, you aren't logging stats as a 0 technique. You're eating up blockers and you're keeping people so that Kenneth Murray and John Michael Terry and Caleb Kelly and whoever else is behind you can log tackles. That's your role, and that's tough for a lot of kids to live with, especially a really high caliber recruit that's used to playing for his high school team and just running through people. That's just not what your job is. So that's definitely tougher. But yeah, I think to me that's the question with this defense. Kerry, I think you're dead on. I think the secondary, you look at it, I think those are 4 guys with NFL talent now, or 5 if you want to throw Jordan Parker and Parnell Motley and say, whoever wins, wins. But at linebacker, I think it's as in good a shape as it's been in probably a decade.
As long as they don't lose like a Curtis Bolton or something.
Yeah. But at D-line, I mean, you just got question marks, and I think this move to, hey, we're going to do some different things allows you some flexibility in recruiting. But to me, and you guys were talking about this, and I hate to kind of go back over old ground, but with you're talking about, who's going to be that guy opposite of Obo. I don't know that it has to be one guy. If Obo can be a 10, 11, 12 sack kind of guy, and you get 4 or 5 other guys that have 4, 5, 6, well, then you're okay. And I think with the linebacker group, there's that possibility to get a couple guys out of that group that could be those kinds. And then maybe DJ Ward does work out. I don't think DJ Ward's any better than a 5 or 6 sack guy, but I think that's possible for him.
And here's the thing, though. If Obo does become that dominant and you have to roll your quarterback away from him, you have to move the pocket on every play, who are you moving the pocket to? You're moving it to Caleb Kelly's side of the field.
That's a great point.
Which is a guy that can make plays.
The sad thing is, Josh, and you said if he can get 11 sacks, I think was that the number that you threw out there?
Yeah.
That's almost half as many as they got last year. I think wasn't 23 the official number of sacks they got in 13 games.
It was somewhere around in there.
I mean, that's almost half of the work that they didn't have last year. So anything helps.
But the thing to remember is, I think he ended up with 9 or 9.5 last year. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility at all for him to get to that place.
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up right now real quick, but I'm pretty sure Obo is not too far behind from. It's possible he could break Eric Stryker's linebacker sack record. I think he has. Oh, I don't know. Do you count him as a linebacker now this year? That could throw a wrench into that. But he's got 12 career sacks.
Yeah, you don't. He's a defensive end.
Yeah, he's got 12 career sacks, and Eric Stryker had 22.5. So 11 sacks for Obo this year would pass Eric Stryker on OU's all-time sack list.
You know what's weird, and you guys have seen him, because like Obo is there at practice, and like when he walks out, like he's usually with Stephen Parker, and Stephen Parker's become a pretty big guy, but like I don't know what happened or when it happened, but like when I walk by Obo now in street clothes, I think to myself, like, I haven't seen a lot of guys that look like that around here lately.
Like an actual football player?
Yeah, like I mean, like a NFL type body now. Like it's almost like he's gotten taller or something.
I said the same thing about Kenneth Murray after we interviewed him after the spring game.
Yeah,
it's like holy
but
shit.
even like Kenneth Murray, like when he has regular street clothes on, he looks like he's a skinny guy still. Mm-hmm. You don't really notice it until he puts the pads on. Like with Obo, like, and maybe he's just wearing tighter clothes. I don't know. But like Obo, like he's got legitimate muscles on top of muscles now. He's more like a Geno Grissom type build.
Yeah. And Geno Grissom was a very impressive dude.
Yeah. He was impressive even when he was in high school, though.
Yeah. Oh, was he?
Yeah. I mean, you remember him, Josh, right?
I remember him once he got there, but I don't remember much of him in high school because he was a late guy for OU.
But, I mean, I remember we did a photo shoot for a magazine with him when we went up to Kansas to do it. And I just remember thinking, like, God, this kid is massive. And what was it? Did he come down? Or no, you know what? I'm thinking of that kid that went to Florida State.
Oh, Mario Edwards?
No.
Cameron Wembley.
Cameron Wembley, who was I'm thinking
like
of.
back then.
Yeah.
I was like,
I'm getting
really? I
him.
don't remember any of this.
Yeah, Cameron Wembley was
the freak show.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. Yeah. All right, so I mean, I think that's really what I took out of spring. And if this defense, it better be better than it was a year ago. I think it can be. I think just having more playmakers on the edge is going to be huge. And let's face it, they should not have the problems that they had at the start of last year where they struggled to find a corner and just destroyed their entire defense because they didn't have one guy. Now, Will Sunderland might be a guy that has some trouble getting beat deep early, but that's the worst of your problems. Then you're doing okay.
I think the biggest concern is hopefully what happened against Ohio State last year doesn't happen again this year. Can you stop a powerful running game? Because you have to trust that secondary that they're going to get stops and they're going to give your pass rush time to get to the passer, especially if you have Obo. And I think Caleb Kelly's great on the other side of that. If you rewatch that spring game, he made a lot of tackles that even the Mike should have been making, that he was all over the place. The worry is, like we've been talking about, that defensive line. Can OU hold up against the run this year, which I think is going to be the question for this year coming out of the spring.
NFL draft coming up this weekend. It is bizarre. I was watching last weekend. The NFL Network was replaying the NFL draft, and I just happened to tune it in as the 2010 draft was getting started.
Good year.
It seems like a lifetime ago when OU had 3 of the top 4 draft picks in the NFL draft. I mean, just watching it, I was like, holy shit, that actually happened.
And it was like a long time ago now, too. It's like
7 years, yeah.
I guess Sam and GK are still in the league.
Gresham's still in the league.
Gresham's still in the league.
Well, Trent Williams.
Trent, obviously, yeah. Trent might
so
be
they're
the
all
best
still in the
tackle
league.
football.
Wow.
They're all Pro Bowlers.
Yep.
I mean, at one point in time.
Dominique Franks that year
Sam didn't
had a pretty
he didn't
decent
have a Pro
NFL
Bowl when he was a
career.
rookie?
I don't think so. He's rookie of the year, though.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And like Josh said, Franks had a good career in Atlanta. Made a few. I think he had a pick 6 or 2 in a career in Atlanta.
It was just one of the better
It
classes
just made
ever.
me think of like what a shitty year 2009 was. Like just Sam separating his shoulder, all those offensive line injuries.
So this week wasn't that bad for Sooner fans. It wasn't as bad as hearing Jermaine Gresham was out for the year than watching Sam Bradford fall down.
Yeah, Gresham missed that whole year. I forgot about that.
Yep, it was like the week leading up to the BYU game.
It was the night before the BYU game.
Yeah. They found out Jermaine Gresham's out for the year, and then Sam Bradford goes out for what ended up being the year, except for that little Baylor game and Texas fiasco.
Now, I remember dueling with Mark Rogers to break that Jermaine Gresham injury.
I want to say that, did I text you live from somewhere in Dallas? Like, hey, I've heard this.
Probably, yeah.
I think that was like right when I started working for Scoop. I was still in school at the time.
Were you?
Yeah.
We probably weren't paying you very much then.
No, I don't think I was like officially working at all. Because I was obviously still in school.
But I mean, coming up this weekend, the draft, the biggest mystery still remains Joe Mixon. Where he's going to go. It'll just be, I think it'll be nice for everybody that another team has to take the beating for having him on their squad.
Mike and Mike will
I'm
be able to
sticking
lead
with
with
it. I
it
think
in
he's
the morning.
going first round.
Chiefs aren't going to be able to take him, are they?
They took Tyreek Hill.
But
Well, that's what
because
he's
they
saying,
took
though.
Tyreek
You
Hill,
can't-
I don't think you can take.
What
And
if they
they could
do and
really
just double
use
down
him.
and be like, yeah, we support domestic violence and any violence against women?
We
I
just
mean,
don't
look,
give a
they
shit.
have really been like, this is why teams don't want to take him. Like, I read several articles out of Kansas City about what that organization has gone through just for having Tyreek Hill, like the picketing from women's groups and all the stuff that they've had to endure. Like, I don't think they can survive taking Joe Mixon too.
It's going to be really, really interesting to see, A, who does, and then B, how they handle it. Because I think there are some places that, I guess this will sound bad, but the football team's going to win out on any argument, I would think.
Yeah.
Well, Green Bay.
If the owner gives his blessing, then they just deal with all the backlash and hope the guy doesn't ever get in trouble again.
When do the Raiders pick? It continues to sound like he's not wowed him,
Looking at you, Joe.
but just hasn't done anything to F himself yet. And that's half the
And they need a running back because their guy just left for Minnesota.
right. That's half the battle is just not screwing yourself over. I mean, you see the story out of was it Cleveland today with the cornerback from Ohio State being possibly dragged along with a rape case or sexual
Wow.
assault, and then
Julius Peppers just tested positive apparently at the combine
for diluted urine. The Florida defensive tackle that choked out a girl.
Yeah.
Like what is wrong with these people?
Well, and by the way, the Raiders pick 24th, and that's right after the Giants at 23, who I've said
the Giants
would make a ton of sense for them to take him. But the Raiders signed Marshawn Lynch, right? So I don't know how you feel about Marshawn Lynch mentoring Joe Mixon for a year, but those are both North Cali guys, so that makes
Did
sense.
their football camp together.
Yep.
If that happens, we need to look into it. I will live in Oakland for a year and document everything on Scoop HD.
Boy,
Just follow those two
is
around.
Be a great
Marshawn Lynch
reality
the
show.
one guy that you're just sitting there saying, boy, he would not be a good mentor for somebody?
Or an awesome mentor, depending on how you want the
I
kid
think
to.
he kind of gets a bum rap. I think people think of Marshawn as a stupid guy, and I don't think he's that way at all.
All I know is I watched the episode where I think it's called Tanked, where they went and built him a fish aquarium
In his house?
entryway. He is the strangest dude ever. He's scared of people. Like, they would come in to install it. He would be like peeking from the top of the stairs to see what they were doing, and they'd be like, "Marshawn, you can come down." He's like, "No."
Didn't want to be around it.
Yeah,
social anxiety.
Just had never met anybody. He doesn't like being around them, but he had Skittles everywhere. They had Skittles all over in the tank.
God, he's a piece of work. I love it. He is so awesome.
His
If you
commercials
ever
are great.
catch that episode of Tanked, or go online and watch it with Marshawn Lynch, it's definitely worth watching. They put the beast mode symbol in the tank and everything.
Oakland's at 24. I don't know if we got that out there.
At the very end. It'll be interesting. Well, I mean, I guess I'm completely blind on their needs right now, but I would think that even though with Lynch, a running back is still high on their board.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, because you don't know what's gonna. I mean, longevity. You might get 2 years out of him if you're lucky. Obviously,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
what the
you don't even
Saints
know
are
what you're going to
hoping.
get. He's been out of the game. People don't understand. Like, that's incredibly hard to do. I don't care how good you are.
And as
Just
flaky
not-
as he is, how do you know he's just not going to play a couple games and go, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and retire?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I already have
This
the
isn't
money.
for me.
Exactly. I mean, the guy's everything you read, he's taken very good care of his money. So this is not a I went broke thing.
Mm-hmm.
on the teams that are talking about Joe Mixon, you hear this like, oh, he's not on our draft board. And this is my thing about this. If you have a stance as a team, we do not select players who have hit women, period. I don't care if it's domestic violence. I don't care if you had a bar. That is our stance. Then make that public. This like individual by individual basis. Oh, Joe Mixon's off our board. Oh, the Chiefs can't draft him because they took Tyreek Hill a year ago. So I guess their quota
It's a
was
bad
met.
business decision, because then if they know that, then they know they don't have to trade. You know, you might not take a guy, but you might be able to get some picks because another team thinks you want him.
But if it's a moral decision, then make it a moral decision. This moral relativism, where it just seems like a PR move. I can't buy it. I can't take teams seriously. But if you say, you know what, this is our rule, we live by it, and even if if the Patriots, it's their rule. If Tom Brady hits Giselle, boom, he's off the team. I don't care who it is.
well, the
That's our
Rockets are
rule.
doing binge drinking night tonight, so I mean, it's their celebration to alcoholism.
Better than crack.
Oh, they'd probably do that if they could get it for $1.
Beverly is just high in
They
the
could
corner.
get people to show up early.
What, Josh, what is, has anybody else been surprised about the, I guess not surprised is the best wording, because I think he's going to be a good quarterback, but the Patrick Mahomes love it always seems like every year there's a guy that skyrockets his draft stock, everything goes good for him, and then he gets drafted in the middle of the first round, and that surprise player of the year. is Mahomes really that guy? I mean, I obviously think that he has a really good arm. I mean, just look at what he did against OU, but
very shoulder problems and elbow problems he's had, though.
it's kind of weird.
Nobody talks about that.
Yeah, it is weird.
I saw someone the other day, and I'm trying to remember who it was, but it was somebody I take seriously. They said that they thought he had the most arm talent of any quarterback since Aaron Rodgers to come into the draft. That's amazing to think about. I mean, you're talking guys like Andrew Luck. You go down the list. Even last year, Paxton Lynch, whatever else you want to say about Paxton Lynch, that dude can make every throw in his sleep. Yeah, he was
really good.
I mean, so, that's pretty amazing. I mean, you guys know I'm an NFL draft junkie, but I think Mahomes is one of those guys that, just like a few others before him, like Steve McNair, like Aaron Rodgers, if they'll give him a year or two to sit and learn and become an NFL quarterback and not try to throw him out there when he's not ready, which to me is what ruined Robert Griffin's career. Mm-hmm. I think if they'd given Robert Griffin time to grow instead of just well, we're going to stick him in this offense. It's pretty much what he ran at Baylor, and he'll earn nothing his first year in the NFL. Then yeah, he'll fail. But if I'm looking at Peter King's mock right now, and he's got him going 27 to Kansas City. Let him go sit for a year or two behind Alex Smith. Yeah, that could be a really good fit because God knows everybody in Kansas City is going to fall over themselves to get rid of Alex Smith.
The sin of being the number one draft pick, it never gets old. I will argue to the day that I die that as much as being the number one pick is awesome, there's nothing wrong with going at the end of the first round to a franchise that has a good offensive line, that you can learn the system of being in the NFL and not being just thrown into the wild. Because, I mean, it can absolutely, you're right, Josh, it can kill a quarterback.
Todd.
Sorry, we had to play Todd.
There's so much.
I heard the first bit of it, so I was like, oh, it's the Todd thing. I got to stop. I'm going to listen.
The thing about Rodgers' arm talent in that draft, he wasn't the first quarterback taken. It was, as Eddie's talking about, this number one overall pick thing. It was Alex Smith. Alex Smith was the number one overall quarterback, and his career in San Francisco always had that hanging over his head of, hey, you were the number one overall pick. You kind of have to live up to that. You're never really judged on your own merit. You're always judged against the number one overall pick. So I don't think that any of these quarterbacks in this draft are worthy. Can you believe that? Josh, do you think the Trubisky stuff, where do you stand on him? I don't see it. I don't understand it, really. I think he's a good quarterback, but this number one overall stuff is blowing my mind.
He's pretty. I mean, he looks good, but he just, for me to say, I'm sorry, I'm not Josh, but I wanted to weigh in on this. I have never seen him throw a ball where I'm just that's impressive. I mean, every time he throws a ball, I'm like, that's really impressive. And I see him run around, I was like, that's really impressive. But he only played a year at North Carolina, and I saw Deshaun Watson put up more points against Alabama than any other team in college football the last 2 years. That part of my brain that just cannot come to grips, and that's why I'm not an NFL talent evaluator, but that part of my brain can't come to grips with the fact that Deshaun Watson's done more.
And proven it against really, really good teams.
Yeah.
I couldn't be more scared if I'm an NFL GM of these two quarterbacks. Not because there's such a way to be wrong on both of them. Like Trubisky, like Kerry said, there's not a lot of tape to watch. There's not a lot of experience. But, man, what you see, you really like. I get it. Now, he's a little bit undersized, but, I don't think that's a huge knock on him. But he's a pocket quarterback, so it's not like Deshaun, who's basically the same size, but can throw from all these different points. Trubisky's going to be a guy that sits back there, so that's a little scary. And to me, his situation reminds me a lot of Mark Sanchez. Everybody wanted it to work. He had that one great year, and then everybody said, boy, if he'd have waited a year, he could have been the guy. But now he went early, and nobody wants to run the risk of, well, maybe he actually is the guy, but we're just going to have to deal with it for a year. He's going to be behind where he would have been next year. So that's a little scary. And Deshaun Watson, as much as I think of him as a college player, he's got some holes, man. I mean, his interceptions were terrible this year. You go back and watch that Auburn game, he was awful. I don't know. There's things that scare me so much about him, and I love that he's a gamer, and I love all that stuff. But how many guys have we had that conversation with, oh, man, he was a great college player? Yeah, man, there's a lot of great college players, working at their local car dealership. That doesn't do it. And he scares me. Both of those guys, if I could avoid it at all, I wouldn't touch them.
Part of that's got to be a little bit of overexposure, though, right? We've seen Deshaun Watson a million times, so we all kind of know his flaws. We know what his limits are. Guys that are new and come out of nowhere, they tantalize us. They tap into this, what could be? And Deshaun Watson, we've seen so much. We know where his holes in his game are, as you said. So I think back to the Elway to Marino, that NFL 30 for 30, which I just loved. And as you go through it, there's no real set list. There's no check mark to go through, okay, this guy has this, because John Elway didn't win a lot of games at Stanford, but he was the best guy in that draft. And they talked about how Dan Marino's stats plummeted his senior year, but he turned out to be the most productive quarterback in NFL history when he retired. So I think Todd Blackledge actually went ahead of Dan Marino in that draft. And the logic behind this stuff, it kind of almost changes from year to year. And it almost seems to me that the best guys are the ones that fit with the right coach. It's about that. If that guy fits with the coach, with the team, that's when they really take off. It's not so much necessarily about what the guy has. It's about the fit of the team. Does that make sense? Would Peyton Manning have been Peyton Manning everywhere, or is he going to be Peyton Manning because he was with the Colts and then Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne?
Sam Bradford's a perfect example of that. He was great early in his career when his offensive line held together, and then it became absolute trash for about 5 years, and then last year it was trash, but it was before it fell apart. He was a really good quarterback, throwing it down the field, and what's his name from Maryland looked really good. Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, they couldn't get off the field on third down. Their defense killed them on the back end of the schedule.
But he's a guy. He's the perfect example of that. You've got to have at least an offensive line in this league to have any success as a quarterback. We say this all the time. It seems like we say this every time we talk about the draft every year. Like Andrew Luck to me is the perfect example of a guy that's got all the tools in the world. If he just had capable people in front of him in a run game, he could lead a team to the Super Bowl.
I don't know.
Anger Josh.
I'm just trying to get Josh.
Why are you trying to upset me, Eddie?
I'm just trying to get Josh riled up.
I haven't had enough this week.
You don't deserve it. The one thing I will say about Patrick Mahomes, if he's going to be like a Steve McNair type guy, stay out of Dave and Buster's, buddy.
I don't get it.
Isn't that where Steve McNair met his?
Is that where he met the chick that killed him?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Cold, Eddie.
I never went down that rabbit hole. Yeah.
Do they show Fatal Attraction to all the players coming in before the combine?
I don't know, but they should show him the program.
I just wonder if Pat Mahomes is going to be able to stick to a system and not try and do a bunch of stupid stuff that's going to get him killed.
That's another thing that happened to RG3 that derailed his career.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's, you look at Rodgers, that was a great thing about, he still ad-libs, he still has that in his game, but you can tell that they worked with him on know your moment, pick your time. In the first quarter, you don't need to scramble on 3rd and 8 to get that extra yard, man. Step out, we'll punt it, it's fine.
That's what Baker Mayfield has gotten, I think, really, when he's at his best, is when he knows those moments when to kind of do those Baker Mayfield, Brett Favre types of plays. When he's at his worst are in games like Houston or Ohio State, when you can tell he's just, no matter what, he's going to try to force something amazing to happen. And that's when it's not there.
That loss at Texas was a good example.
Yep, when he's just trying to force it every time and not those plays can happen, and Baker Mayfield's really good at them, like Aaron Rodgers was, like a guy like Brett Favre was. But it's about allowing them and knowing that feel for the game to happen. And to bring it back to, I think that's what Mayfield has, and why the quarterback position is so important, why quarterbacks are getting taken first overall, and guys like running backs are falling to the second, like Derrick Henry. Something Kerry and I were talking about a little bit before the podcast is, what's happened to running backs? Nobody cares about running backs anymore. The value of running backs is plummeting, and you have guys like Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine who, Joe Mixon's personal stuff make it a little more difficult to judge, but Samaje Perine probably is going to go in the 3rd round, and he's the all-time leading rusher in Oklahoma history.
It kind of just goes without mentioning, but that's just been the way that Samaje Perine's whole career went at OU. Is that
it would be
he was
apropos,
in the shadow.
It'd be apropos if he ends up being a star next year in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll tell you why he has a chance. And this is something I talked to coaches about last week. I'm going to write something about it leading up to draft day. But you think about it, Samaje Perine, name me another big back like Samaje Perine that you could keep on the field in third down situations.
Michael Turner back in the day is kind of the example I go to.
But even in college, can you really think of a whole lot of those guys? I mean, that abomination of a running back they had for Auburn couldn't.
Could Foreman?
Deontay Foreman kind of could.
In modern football,
But there's
I can't
not a
think of
whole lot of
anybody.
guys like Samaje Perine. And I think that will be something that really, I mean, people talk about third round, fourth round. I think that's the thing that probably puts him in the third round.
He's a bigger Maurice Jones-Drew. I think he's...
I mean, look how much that's killing Adrian Peterson's career right now. The fact that you can't use him on third downs.
Yeah, and that's probably why he had to settle to sign with New Orleans. I mean, it's not. Let's not act like Adrian Peterson had a whole lot of options to sign with.
He thought he was going to have a lot of options.
And as it turned out, there was none.
Oh, I'm so shrimp rich.
Now he's in New Orleans, shrimp rich.
Dude, I heard that audio.
Okay, wow.
Hey,
We must have fixed something.
we know what we're doing.
So, yeah, that was to settle for $3 million and basically he's got a 2-year deal. He wants to play for a year and prove to people that he's still Adrian Peterson and then go get $10 million next year.
Seems like weird. I felt like he would go to more of a Super Bowl contender. I just felt
He
like
wanted to, like a bit like we're talking about. There's not a lot of options.
Yeah, I want to go to the Masters and play in it next year, but nobody's inviting me.
That's crazy. Not. I mean, it's crazy in the sense of, what's happened to him. He was an MVP a couple years ago. I mean, he led the Vikings to the playoffs with nothing on that team, and now a couple years later, what is he now? 32, 33?
32.
It's the nature of that position, guys. He could run for 1,200 yards next year, and he won't get $10 million. He just won't.
Yeah.
That won't happen. And that's got to be tough for a guy like that, who's a future Hall of Famer to face that.
Yeah, what did he have? $12 million a year on the table with Minnesota, and they said we're not going to redo the deal. We're opting out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receivers are more valuable than running backs now. You'd rather have a guy like Antonio Brown than a top tier running back. You want that top receiver, right? I think receivers have overtaken
All the money,
running backs.
quarterback is where all the money goes
right.
first. But yeah, receivers, defensive backs, linebackers. Well, not even
Offensive
linebackers
linemen.
anymore, but tackles. I mean,
Yep.
I mean, just look at what New England's done. Have they ever had a running back up there that is just
no, they've
a
had
guy that everybody
it's like
wanted?
Garrett Blount, who
Corey Dillon.
probably couldn't get a
Exactly.
job anywhere else.
Kevin
Exactly.
Falk, Sammy Morris.
Yeah, Kevin Falk. Last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here, we're running a little long, but the drop of Dede Westbrook, I don't think the whole thing, since Dede had his pro day, like I have never read one story, heard one piece of news that said the following: Dede Westbrook is really impressing people. Like there has not been one shred of positive news about Dede Westbrook really since the end of the season. I mean, not going to the Senior Bowl, not working out the combine, basically falsifying his 40 times coming out of OU's pro day, which was bizarre.
Because they were already good.
It was like, it started out at like 4.28, and then all of a sudden it's like 4.22. And it's like, dude, there were 32 teams there. They know you ran a 4.38 or whatever it was.
He cannot quit. I don't know if it's lying to himself, lying to others. Like there's a common theme of
He has
lying
idiot agents.
in all of every happening of Dede Westbrook. There's a common thread of lying.
And I think just signing up with Young Money and them not being adequately staffed to even negotiate an NFL contract, which I've heard is part of it. That they have to. I've been told that Young Money has to not freelance, but basically outsource so they can get someone that's approved by the NFL to negotiate contracts.
It's mind-blowing is what it is on how stupid the decision-making process is for Dede Westbrook.
I was checking out a mock draft before the podcast, working on something before the draft this week. George Kittle was projected to go in the 4th round,
Norman High's own.
and Dede Westbrook was projected to go in the 5th round.
That's amazing.
I've seen Kittle in the 3rd.
That's kind of
He had a great combine.
Really?
Great
He tore it
combine,
up.
yeah.
And you watch that kid on tape, that dude is a blocking machine. Like he's not your flex out tight end. That dude will line up and kill some people. He's He's really good.
He is like, and here's why I'm rooting for George Kittle. Like, I'm sitting there watching the combine, and I see him run his time, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, and I just typed in like, Norman High's George Kittle just runs a 4.55 or whatever. I think it was a 4.55 at the NFL Combine. Like, not less than an hour later, he retweets it. Like, I didn't even tag him. He just went and Twitter searched George Kittle just to see what people were saying about it, which is total baller.
If I ran a 4.55, I'd do the same thing.
I just can't believe that I had this like image of George Kittle when I saw him at Norman High School.
He was skinny and tall.
So
and
skinny, so tall, so not unathletic, but just
he was a nice receiver.
He's Charlie Kolar, essentially.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was just thinking, Joe.
And he became, Iowa's strength coach, I think, is the second highest strength coach in the country, and I can see why now.
Yeah, he is. He is the second highest paid.
Behind Alabama or something?
I think so. I think
Look what they do with those offensive linemen. Every 2 or 3 years, they've got a top 10 offensive lineman that was a nobody in high school.
Yeah. They do a great job.
The Kirk Ferentz
They just don't recruit a lot of kids.
And they just don't win a lot of games.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just don't have the skill guys.
Their offense is
people want to
literally
complain about recruiting to Oklahoma from the state of Oklahoma. Try Iowa from the state of Iowa. That's murderer's row, man. That's tough.
Well, and it's like their offense literally looks like Chuck Long is still in it. It is the most archaic offense. It's so boring to watch their games.
Drop back.
2.5 yards in the cloud of dust.
Oh, so boring.
But it that kind of style of play doesn't get them to 10-2. But what it does do is once or twice a year they pop up and beat somebody they shouldn't because they're not.
They played for the Big Ten championship last year, didn't they?
No, 2 years ago.
They just beat Michigan State. Yeah.
Yep. They no, Michigan State beat Iowa. Let's be real clear about that. But
oh God, I forgot about your dual citizenship.
Indeed, Jeff Smoker till the day I die. So,
by the way, I want to finish this off by mentioning this. Eddie, someone of prominence came up to me after practice the other day, the final OU practice, and said, "That's not true that Eddie actually married somebody, is it?" And I was like, wow, this person listens to our podcast. That's kind of scary. I can't say who it is, but...
We had Eddie married somebody?
A coach?
I won't say.
Okay. Well,
Eddie officiated a wedding.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was still thinking...
Yeah, he didn't marry someone. Like, he didn't take a wife.
Gotcha. I keep messing that up. Yeah, that's me.
It'd be a wife.
Would she work at Sugar's?
No, she might work at Diamonds in Denver, though.
Okay, now you're really getting people in trouble. But no, they were fascinated by the fact that you actually married a couple of people.
Yeah. Well, I
didn't believe it.
I was related to one, so it...
We mentioned that it was your cousin.
Yeah.
And they're going strong still, right? They got
Absolutely.
the Eddie bump.
I'm going to see them here in about 2 weeks at another wedding that I will not be officiating, just attending. I had to pass a background check to go to this one.
What?
Really?
It's on a military base.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
And you passed, or do you know yet?
I'm still supposed to be going, so yeah. I'm guessing I have.
Josh, any Laney revelations lately? Any new life experiences with your daughter?
Yeah, we're going through swim classes right now, and we're having to do them in the mornings. We kind of had to sneak in because she's starting a little behind some of the girls in her age group with the trainer we're going through, and so we're having to do them in the morning. So I take her twice a week before school to this class, and then we go on to school. Well, Lainey loves the water. She's a swimmer. She likes being out in it. We put her little float jacket on her, man, and she'll just swim all day. She loves it. She does like a little less putting her head under the water. So I go to this class, and I have to sit outside of the pool area, and there's kind of windows where I can look through. And I pretty much listen to my daughter cry daddy for about 30 minutes because this woman keeps dunking her head under the water, and she is pissed.
Why won't you save me?
Because she's so good. The lady's
and you said that this is something
I ask her to.
You said that you told me this is something that your wife forces you to do. Like, she will not sit there for 30 minutes while someone drowns your daughter.
To say that she makes me do it it would be wrong, but there is no question that once, like the first class, Tiffany was kind of interested in, and then I told her how it went, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't have to be at that." So it's much for the better that she has to be at work anyway, and I can take her to the class, and she cries and screams, "Daddy!" and then once the 30 minutes is over, she's fine. So but it is like it's jarring to watch your kid like. There's this lady that I've literally known for 3 days now at half-an-hour increments who puts her hand on the back of my kid's head and dunks her little butt in the pool and like holds her under and makes her swim for an inordinate amount of time. Like it's weird. Like there is a weird sensation with that, but at the same time, like she's teaching her to grab the walls and like so. My in-laws have a pool, so if she fell in, she can be safe. And there's all these good reasons to do it, but I won't lie that you're like. That's my 2-year-old, borderline being drowned out there right now.
It is kind of nice to know that there is a place in the world where people treat, children like they did 50 years ago.
Indeed.
Which is just like, throw them outside with a bunch of dogs and tell them to run.
Just give it time. There will be some soft parent that tries to sue swimming classes because they don't like how they...
to me, that's truly amazing. Like, there's a woman that drowns your child temporarily.
Is that not how you guys...
forces her to...
That's how I
I
learned.
remember going to swim class when I was little.
Yeah, they drowned me.
And
That's
it was
what happened.
early in the morning. But it was like... they would tell us to go under... I never really had a problem going underwater. Like, I went all the way through lifeguard school.
I remember my mom freaking out about it, that she didn't want to dunk me. But yeah, that's what they do. You dunk a kid.
Have we had the conversation that this guy was a pretty accomplished swimmer as a little guy? Like, went to state championships and stuff.
That you were?
I think we've talked about that
like,
before.
I was a really, I don't want to say like really special, but like I did like some borderline junior national stuff.
Interesting. I don't remember having that.
And then I grew into a football player's body, and that all left. You start going to
body
meets,
went away.
and then there are like 8-year-olds that are 5'11", and you're like, okay, that's where this train's going to end right here. That dude has arms longer than my entire body. So
I think Josh made me aware of this one time when we were on a spring tour after I went on like a 30-minute diatribe about how soft and how weak I think swimmers are.
I just let him go. I was like, so Eddie, I used to love swimming. I was great at it.
It was only one of the few things I've been good at in life, but thanks.
Well, it's always like one of those things like, man, my dad's an asshole. Well, my dad died 4 years ago. How do you feel about that, buddy? You have to let them just sink themselves into horrible awfulness.
Oh, that's good stuff. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast. But hopefully we got a lot of your stuff out about the recruiting situation right now at Oklahoma. Coaches, Josh, you might just tell people coaches, valuations are going on. Like I said, Lincoln Riley's he tweeted out earlier that he was in New Orleans, but kind of give people a look into what's going on right now with the recruiting evaluation period.
Yeah, for those that don't really follow it or don't know it that well yet, basically coaches this time of year, and not just OU, from every program in the country, they hit the road, they get chances to see these kids in person. Now, there's all sorts of rules about how they can contact them, that sort of thing, so they kind of have to walk a fine line. But that's why you're seeing all these new offers go out. OU might see a guy in February that they like on tape, but they haven't seen him in person. They might think, oh, he's a little short, or I want to talk to his coaches. They may have reason to hesitate in offering that kid. Well, now they can go see that kid. They can talk to his head coach. They can talk to whoever they want to around the campus and get a feel for what that kid's like and make that offer. So I think you're seeing, we talked about a lot of Georgia offers. I thought it was interesting yesterday, and I know Joe talked to one of the guys. OU made a couple of junior college defensive line offers yesterday, which I think leads into some of the stuff that I've said here recently, where I think Oklahoma is starting to soften to the idea of taking another defensive tackle. But I hadn't seen it going in that direction. So, that tells you this stuff is always fluid. It's always moving. So we'll kind of see what happens with that. But I do think you're going to continue for the next 10 days or more to see more and more and more offers go out, not only in Georgia, but you'll see some in Texas. I wouldn't be shocked if we hear, Lincoln Riley made a few offers in New Orleans today. So that stuff's just going to continue to evolve. because at any given time, Oklahoma's going to have 5 coaches at least on the road for the next week or two.
All right, so we'll keep you updated with that at Soonerscoop.com. Also, the NFL draft coming up this weekend. We've got some features coming on that as well throughout the rest of this week, and we'll see. Podcast we haven't really talked about as a group if we'll make this every couple of weeks during the off season. Maybe not so much so when we get up into the camp season, which we're kind of in right now. But OU's camps, we got the Rivals camps, we got the 5-star camp coming up, all that stuff going through June. So there's going to be plenty to talk about, but we'll see how the podcast. I tell you what, if you want to sponsor the podcast, feel free to give us a shout. Kerry Murdoch at yahoo.com if you want. And then it'll definitely be every week. But if you're interested in sponsoring, do that. Then you can be sure of a podcast every week. But anyway, I want to thank Josh McCuistion. Check us out on iTunes. Go give us a rating if you don't mind. Appreciate all the kind reviews that we've had on there as well. And thanks to Eddie Radosevich, to Joe Duvall here in studio. I'm Kerry Murdoch, and we'll see you guys next time on the Unofficial 40 Podcast.